and I cannot believe it's October 1st. This time, I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Bomke?
Here.
Mr. Cavalier?
Here.
Mr. Cohen? Here. Mr. Dudenheffer?
Here.
Mrs. Maurer? Ms. Shelton? Here. Mr. Snellings?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Mauer's out of town on business. Before we get started on the regular agenda, I have an honor and a privilege to present an award this afternoon to our Commissioner of Revenue. He won it last week. He was named one of only 6 public officials in the entire world to win the prestigious Public Sector Champion from the Thomson Reuters Company. And that happened last week. He won in the category of Public Outreach, which honors officials that demonstrate transparency and openness in government. His efforts to educate taxpayers not only in Stafford but throughout the Commonwealth on tax issues have been recognized for their positive impact on public's knowledge of how government is operating and using their money. Most notably, about a year ago, he began explaining complex tax issues in short video clips that are easy to understand. These videos inform citizens of what their government is doing, how it affects them, and what they can do to positively affect change. Scott, if you join me down front. I know you can see this. If you can't see it, he'll hold it up. This is a beautiful award. It is solid crystal, a little gold in it, all kinds of stuff. I was going to keep it up there and bring it down, but I was afraid I'd drop it. So it is really an honor for me, Scott. You do a great job for Stafford, and I appreciate it. And present this award. Oh, my goodness.
Gentlemen, close. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for nominating me for the award and recognizing the work that we're doing. And I've got a couple of my staff members out here that were instrumental in helping me win the award and produce the videos. And honestly, they're the experts. They bring these issues to me, and they help me break them down into easily understandable presentations. So my name's on the trophy, but it is everybody in my office that helps make this stuff happen. So I want to thank my staff because I wouldn't be here without them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. We've got to make a little cut through here. Speed things up a little bit. At this time, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman.
And if not, do I hear a motion to approve? Second. Motion to approve, a second. Any discussion? Cast your votes. Tally the votes. For some reason, I didn't register, so. Motion carries. Presentations by the public. I do have one speaker card. I would ask when you come forward, state your name and address. The green light will come on. You will have 3 minutes to speak on any subject unless it is a public hearing for this evening. When the yellow light comes on, you have about a minute left. When the red light comes on, please wrap up your comments. Speaker card I have is Mr. Jeff Adams.
Jeff Adams, 449 Kellogg Mill Road. I think Scott's already left. If I'd known he was going to win, I'd have charged him for that 4x8 sign on the farm. It's pointing right at Kellogg Mill Road, but I'll go upstairs and talk to him about that later. The reason I'm here today, every time I come to one of these meetings without going out of my way, I have to cross the bridge at Able Lake. I gave the clerk a little few minutes ago some pictures. And if you've driven across the lake recently, you will know that the lake is down considerably. And I mean way down. I've seen it lower in the last 40 years, but it's been a while since it's been this low, and I think it's going to go lower because there's not really any rain in the forecast. So if y'all could pass a motion to get some rain, I'd appreciate that as well. But what I would like to see, there are tens of thousands of tons of sediment between the bridge as you look north to the opening of the lake. And every time it rains, that sediment keeps moving towards the dam, and eventually during a hard rain, it goes over the dam and into the Potomac River and so on and so forth. It's getting low enough, and I said something several years ago, it'd be great to go in there with an excavator or a bulldozer and some dump trucks and take that stuff out of there, haul it away, and hint, hint, I know a place about a half a mile from the lake where it could be unloaded to keep it from going into the river. Now, I'm not here speaking for Tri-County. I'm speaking for Jeff Adams. But clean water is important to me. And if we could remove that sediment when the water is as low as it is now, yes, it would cost money, but you're going to pay, as the old Fram commercial said, you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay later. And when the water is as low as it is and going lower, now would be the time to consider removing some of that water. Oh, I'm on yellow, okay. It would also help the people that use that lake recreationally with their boat launches and things like that. Right now, it's impossible to launch some boats and get them beyond the bridge. There's just not enough water. So I'd just like to make that recommendation for you to see if you could haul some of that stuff out of there. And like I say, hint, hint, I know where multi-thousand tons could be deposited. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Highly unusual for the board to do this, the chairman to do this, but I will answer your first question because we were briefed on it this afternoon in committee. The lake has two issues right now. Number one is a drought, and I wouldn't call it a drought, a lack of rain, I should say. We haven't had any rain in a month. Number two, we have another issue at the dam. If you remember a few years back, we had a leak, and we're working now to get that leak plugged. So there are two issues that are causing it. And I agree with you, if we could pass a resolution and get rain, we would do it tonight, but I'm not sure that'll work.
I didn't mention the latter as a member of Tri-County. I knew that, but I wasn't going to.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
To mention that.
Thank you very much. That's the only speaker card I have. Is anyone on my right that'd like to address the board? Yes, Ms. Hazard.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Holly Hazard, 59 Harwell Drive. I'm actually here as a member of the school board today. I believe that you all were provided a list of the legislative priorities that were passed by the school board last Tuesday. I just wanted to make sure that I brought those to your attention and just highlighted some of the areas that are of utmost importance to us on the school board as we move forward. I find that when we can lobby together, we get a lot more done. Our first one on the list, I think you all have been provided a copy, is an increase to the cost to compete. Why is this so important? You all have heard it for years. 25% for Stafford County, just when we are competing with Northern Virginia, is crazy. We provided some information last year on where our teachers went north. I don't have the official numbers from Stafford County Public Schools, but in talking to some of my colleagues in the northern counties and trying to get their numbers, it looks like our numbers are probably a turnover rate of around 14 to 15%. My understanding is Prince William's is around 10 and Loudoun's is around 7. I couldn't get the Fairfax one, but I'm still working on it. But I'm just saying, we are the end of the line, and at some point we are going to have to address that. I really hope that our local delegations will understand as we move hot lanes down, as we have always had to do emissions testing, and that our economic figures are part of Northern Virginia, that we really need to look at that issue and continue to work with our local staff. our local delegation. Eliminating the support staff cap, that's going to be something the VSBA and the Superintendent's Association is going to be looking at very, very carefully, because that was frozen in 2009, and we have lost about $9.2 million in Stafford in that area. We have some other things about these pre-K programs and stuff, of getting funding for them. We are not funded at an ADM level, and as you all know, and I thank you for supporting the North Star building. However, I will say that does come at a cost, and without getting adequate funding for those programs, we need space. So I just wanted to highlight, again, targeting, working with the state to come up with a plan to make sure that Virginia is competitive to get teachers. It's not just our salaries, it's also our reciprocity, which by and large is about none. A local student who was in Stafford County Public Schools had a very difficult time transferring a biology teacher from middle schoolers and high schools. Believe me, we need them. She almost couldn't even get her license after being here 4 months. It's crazy. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you what we were thinking. We ask that you consider those and that we work together as a team as we head into the legislative session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hazard. Anyone else on my right like to address the board? Anyone on my left like to address the board?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. I bought a Where's Waldo hat in memory that if any of you have been on the board since 1982, Resolution 82-341 represents all the people without a Stafford County water and sewer bill, including Waldo. So hopefully you'll find him. Maybe we should make a video of him. 1,461 days. That's 4 years. It's coming up to the end for some of you. Remember, there are no term limits, only election day. Yes, and remember, citizens, that 2021, we have to redistrict. So whoever you put in office, be careful of how it was voted on in 2011. That's how we got the Pence fence. Oh, it's October, and nothing was done in September. Wow. I love meetings. It's the place where the minutes are kept and the hours are lost. Just amazing. I was on Facebook, and I saw that you're talking about a downtown area. Well, remember, this is a Commonwealth. We haven't had no downtowns in counties in 1664. Now, we could have downtown Falmouth. Then we could have a mayor there. And then you'd have your own school, and you have a parking lot that's $39 million. But what do I know? Debates are coming. Friday they start. Next Friday, I'll be there. It'll be great. And then on 10/18, there's also another debate. But remember, the Stafford Fair is going to be around, so I'd like to see everyone out there. You probably see Where's Waldo. He's really transparent and open-minded. He wears red, white, and blue. He's never changed. Republicans, we know you only wear red. The Democrats, they only wear blue. We see how blue it is in the country. Was it quid pro Joe? Oh, mispronounced it. Wow, where am I? I think I covered everything on my list. Oh, I guarantee you one thing, my name will never be etched in glass on county property.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on my left like to address the board? Bringing it back to the board, reports of board members.
Mr. Cavalier.
Thank you, Julia. Number of different events in the last couple of weeks I've attended. Meeting with the Woodstream Homeowners Association, they had a lot of issues, and this ties into another one from Potomac Village, and we're really starting to get behind on our traffic calming studies here. I know we have a shortage of staff here at the county, and VDOT's getting a lot of requests right now, but I hope we can start getting those put back on track. One of the other major complaints out of Woodstream, because they live right next to the Stafford Borough commuter lot, is the vehicles. And Lynn, I'm glad you're here to hear this. That have been left in their boats and RVs and campers and such, and they're being there, basically parked there permanently. So if we could have the state police or VDOT address that, that would be helpful. I also attended with a lot of others here the employee picnic for Stafford County down at Pratt Park. And then right after that, both Gary and I went up to the Rouser Building Diamond Anniversary. And that was a good history lesson, I think, and Mr. Cohen. So I learned a lot there, some things that I had not learned before at some of the other events that we've had there. And there's a lot of history in that building. And one thing in particular that struck me was that when that school was called the Stafford Training School, that if you graduated from there and you went to apply for college, you didn't receive, it wasn't well received by college admission officers because it wasn't a fully accredited school. So after integration, that pretty much solved that problem. But it ties into the story that I saw today about accreditation, and all our schools in Stafford County are accredited, and so that does mean something for people who think that, we boast that fact, but, to say that it doesn't mean anything is wrong, because it does mean something. It always has meant something, and go ahead and apply to a college from an unaccredited school and see what happens. Also, I think it was that same day, I attended the Quiet Harbor Evening Lions Club art auction to raise money for charity here in the local area, as well as then the next day, the Friends and Family Day at Little Forest Baptist Church. And a little something about that. It's a very small church just off Route 1, across from One Stop Auto, and has a long history here. One of the first African-American churches here, predominantly in the county. But when they first started the congregation there, they didn't have a building, and so they met under a persimmon tree. Now that persimmon tree is no longer there, one of the native persimmons in Virginia at the time, and because it's been, I think, well over 100 years now. But so my wife decided that it would be a good idea if we bought them a persimmon tree. So we did that and planted it there in front of the church, right beside the plaque that the county provided to the church there as a historic church here in Stafford County. Also attended the North Star Early Childhood Education ribbon cutting ceremony. Was very surprised that day when I think Ms. Shelton was there and Ms. Baumke was there. Anybody else am I missing this time? That the First Lady of Virginia actually was there too. That was quite the surprise for I think everybody just about from our board anyhow. So I did make the remark to her that I would have dressed nicer if I'd have known she was here. But alas, we were not notified of that. I had a town hall in Quiet Harbor, and then I went to their board of directors meeting and finished up the last week with the Potomac Point Winery Fall Festival, which was a huge event. It did rain a little bit more than people liked that day, but there were tents and a lot of both inside and outside activities there, and it's really becoming a huge event here in Stafford County, and I hope everyone can get a chance to attend that sometime. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you very much. I attended the Healthy Generations meeting, which I'm the representative from this board to go to. They're making some great strides in helping our elderly community. Along with so many others, attended the employee picnic with a rather amazing turnout, and a lot of hard work was put into that, and I think it was appreciated. The Rouser Diamond Anniversary, Mr. Cavalier mentioned, I mean, there's just a wealth of history in Stafford, and Mr. Snellings knows a great deal of it, lived it, and I mean that in an amazing way, because he was here during many of the more challenging areas in our nation's history about desegregation. Yeah, well, I'm trying to get out of the hole. But our residents in Stafford just did an amazing job during the whole segregation, desegregation era. And it's really something to share with our students and our young people to see the excellent character that our residents had back then and now. I met with VDOT on several different issues and appreciate their help, particularly in dealing with the road views. We are in the fall, so loads of churches are having fall festivals, which I encourage people to go to. You experience the best of Stafford, and the small rural character that we love. I met with many residents in the Falmouth area as we continue to make that area, in the words of the great Irma, beautiful downtown Falmouth. Ferry Farm Baptist Church is having its 60th anniversary, which is pretty amazing, and I hope to have some more communications about that in the future. And then lastly, because I've commented on this a couple times, I was very pleased to see the school board last week put into their request for their carryover funds to address the air conditioning systems in the kitchens in the schools that are deficient. And so as somebody, Mr. Cavalier brought this up a couple months ago, and then I've been harping on this, and Dwayne McCosker on the school board has been helping me, and I'm very happy to see this is moving forward so that we can address that need. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Just briefly, we had a meeting earlier today with the base commander and a couple members of his staff. We talked about coordination of a lot of different aspects of the base and the Stafford County, including providing water, and there's some sewer issues. Also, public safety, we do a lot of sharing. Most of the discussion centered around transportation. Their number one transportation issue is the the back entrance, or the Russell Road entrance, and the bridge over Route 1. It's an issue that it's unusual because it's right on the border between Stafford and Prince William County, which creates a large number of issues, but we promise to work with them to see what can be done involved in that. So I asked when the Lunga Reservoir area would be open, and I think if he'd had a hat, he would have dipped it below his eyes and stuff, but he's saying at least 2 more years before the Lunga Reservoir area is opened up. It was a really valuable, beautiful place for Stafford residents to go have recreation, camping, and RVing and fishing and all that. So when that closed, it was really a shot at especially the Northern Virginia area. I just lastly want to remind people, if you haven't heard before, but on the ballot coming up in about a month, we will have a transportation bond referendum. And if you have any questions about that, please reach out and ask. The county itself isn't in a position to advocate, but this is one person who advocates and asks that you please consider voting for it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to board members, you can reach out to staff, or just reach out to me. So thank you very much. That concludes my remarks.
Ms. Shelton?
I'd like to start with Brook Road. It was supposed to open today on the 1st of October, at least partially open, so at least we could have some traffic to go through and look at it. Unfortunately, it didn't quite meet the standards that we expect, that we want to give to our residents, so it's going to be closed for another month, but I wanted you, or maybe a month. Please clarify that. Is it, if it's just 2 weeks? I may be wrong, but it's going to be closed a little bit longer, just to make sure that they can get the concrete poured and we can circumvent that location safely, because apparently we weren't going to be able to do that. I just wanted to also let you guys know, I went out to Crow's Nest. When's the last time y'all went out there? I love that place. And I went out there to go look at the new land that we just gave to Crow's Nest last board meeting. And it reminded me to thank Paul and the other board members, Paul Melday and the other board members who started that project. It's just such a beautiful gem, and I'm really glad that a lot of people don't know about it, because it's awesome. And it's what I mean by that. It is just it's very quiet. It's very natural. It's just an amazing gem for us to have, and I'm proud to have that in Aquia. I'd also like to talk about the Aquia Town Center in the Garrison. If you don't know this, we don't own that land. Stafford County doesn't own it. It belongs to private property. And while we would love to do, and I think frankly, if I look along the board members, we've done just about everything we can think of to get those private property owners to build it out so we can use it. We want to use it too. We have to drive by it, but we're not successful. However, the reason we talk about downtown, and I'll use the word downtown because it's a vision, is that when we look at downtown Stafford, that's property we do own. So we do have some control over it. So unfortunately, I can't help what other people want to do with their property, but we can help what we want to do with ours. In the future, everybody will be able to weigh in on what that looks like as we go forward. I had the opportunity to replace Mr. Cohen at the Rappahannock River Basin Commission. Thank you for letting me go. I love that place. And I really like meeting with the Friends of the Rappahannock. They have some interesting perspectives about the environment, which frankly I found out I really kind of feel the same way. And I attended the River Fest, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was a wonderful place to eat crabs. I'm from Texas. My perspective of eating crabs was new. That was an interesting experience for me. I've not done that before. Have you guys ever done that? I bet you have. And so I hadn't done that, but that was a great perspective. Moving forward, I also went to a ribbon cutting that Mr. Snellings gave him a beautiful speech at. That was just wonderful, Mr. Snellings, for the opening of the Kaiser Permanente Clinic. If you didn't know that, we have a new addition to Stafford County, and what's awesome about it is these people, first of all, they bring a level of care that I just really wasn't aware of. And I'm going to tap into that very briefly because one of the things that they do is they have available for grants for different locations, and we're going to explore them relating to special needs and affordable housing, something that's very, very dear to my heart. And as a reminder, coming up in the very near future, tomorrow morning, we're starting the high school debates again. I'm going to get to participate in those and just get awed by the experience and really the articulate individuals that we have in our high schools. And finally, on Thursday, Congressman Whitman is bringing forward his town hall on broadband here to Stafford County, and we'll be meeting again at that same hospital at 2 p.m. if anybody is interested and wants to participate. And sir, that concludes my comments.
Ms. Baumke?
Yes, thank you. I also wanted to echo Mr. Cavalier's comments about the picnic. The picnic was great. A huge shout out to Reggie Perkins over at Pratt Park and his staff. They did a phenomenal job like they always do. It was a hot day and they did a wonderful job, and it was a lot of fun. A shout out also to Captain Lee Peters for being at that event and making sure that the K-9 showed up, because there was a little bit of a mishap, and he made sure that it all happened for those young people that were there. So thank you for that. I also attended a multicultural event over at Del Webb this past weekend, and it was really fun. It wasn't in my district, but somebody invited me, and people were there dressed up in costumes and serving all kinds of food throughout the world. So with all kinds of different constituents, it was really neat. I also attended a really neat forum that was put on by a group called Be Well Rappahannock. And it's all about serving this region and trying to make sure we get resources to people that need them in whatever your need may be. It could be mental health. And they had an event up at the John Fick Center this past week, and the headline was called In Plain Sight. And they had mock bedrooms set up of teenagers. And you had to walk in and identify what kind of things might be used for using drugs and what is paraphernalia that might be used for addiction. And it was very interesting. I would say most of the people standing around didn't know what, a plastic Coke bottle with a bottom attached to it could be used for. And I mean, there was a plethora of things. So it was very educational. I would say if you have elementary and teenage and high school kids, you can't educate yourself enough, because what the young people are doing, they are very smart, they are very crafty. And trust me, they're 10 steps ahead of all of us parents. So anyway, that was very well done. And I wanted to thank Deputy Burgess because she was there at that event. Let's see. Also, I attended the North Star Early Childhood Development Center, and really the school division did a phenomenal job in the renovations to that property. The library is actually up on the stage in the gymnasium, so it was a real transformation of that space. So really excited to see how the students do there. Also attended the Clearview picnic. And they wanted me to address transportation issues in the region. And one of their big questions, since they all live in Clearview, is when is Clearview Heights going to be repaved? They feel like they should be up on the list. So I have emailed Lynn Keenan, and I'm going to ask her about that later in her presentation. And then lastly, I just want to thank Supervisor Dudenheffer for adding to our infrastructure something that came up with FAMPO, so the community is aware that we're trying to work with VDOT on having walking lanes up from the southeast corner of the intersection at Route 17 and I-95, having a walking zone that goes all the way up to the target areas for all those people that live over in Old Forge and Stafford Landing. So we're working with VDOT on that, as well as a lower level bridge that at this point in time is not going to be repaired. So anyway, I appreciate them bringing that to our attention, and that will be coming to the full board. That's all I have, and I would like to pull item number 4 from the consent. Thank you.
Mr. Snellings.
I have been reminded by several board members, staff members, and my wife that the Washington Nationals play at 8:08. So I will defer comments in the interest of time. County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will defer my comments as well.
Mr. Foley.
Mr. Chairman, you have the strategic planning report, which contains about 25 of your top priorities based on your strategic direction that you provided and adopted last November, almost a year ago. I think we have probably the most thorough report that you've received to date, and these items are moving along pretty aggressively. You'll see them on your agenda coming up. You had them in your committees today. You've got them before you today. Public safety salary scale is an example. So those are there for your information, but I think you're getting regular updates through agenda items, either at committees or the regular meeting. We're very focused on this, and I think it's starting to show some benefits. I would just mention one item regarding our organizational culture efforts and high performance. We did have our kickoff of our new vision and values on September 25th. And wanted to thank Mr. Snellings for being there on your all's behalf. I knew there were a lot of conflicts to making that. We had over 300 employees attend that. And when you consider most of our public safety folks, which is about half our workforce, were out in the field working and couldn't be there, that was a high percentage of the rest of our staff. So very well attended. A lot of great information came from our middle managers, our middle leaders in the organization, bringing forth their ideas through presentations, about how we could enhance living our values and our vision. And some of those were about just improvements we can make in the organization in terms of how we engage with our staff. So a great event, a lot of really productive stuff that we'll be taking and moving forward, again, based on engagement from our staff and their ideas, not just coming from the top. So that was a big event for our organization and a kickoff. And again, Mr. Stellings, thanks for coming to attend. Mr. Chairman, the only other thing I'd mention is the comment on Brook Road. That will not be a month before it opens. I don't think we have an exact date, but we'll get it out to you as soon as we can. I think we believe it will be open within a week or so. And I'm looking at Jason to. Okay. So we'll keep you informed on that as soon as we've got more information. But I do think it'll be done before a month from now. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. At this time, we're going to have the VDOT quarterly report. Ms. Lynn Keenan. How you doing, Lynn?
How are you?
Good, thank you.
All right, so in the effort to be brief, I sent you all a board report earlier, so I'll just brief by exception on some of the bigger ticket items. I know 8:08 is the time to hit, so. We wanted to announce that the Diverging Diamond at exit 630 is scheduled to open in the December timeframe. Our communication staff has said that if anybody wants to do a hard hat tour, we can set those up with members of the board. So you can see how that can work. So if you want to email me or Kelly Hannon directly, we are happy to set those up. We're eager to explain how it works. We participated in a number of HOAs over the past few weeks, just explaining the concept of a diverging diamond, how you navigate through that. I know it's going to be a new traffic pattern for the area. We also have trailers that'll be showing in a number of the local movie theaters, so you can see how to navigate around that. So we're happy to explain that further. We want to make sure the community is engaged. Yes, sir.
Can you send me a link or whatnot to the video?
Sure,
I've been
absolutely.
showing it on YouTube, but this way I can disseminate it to
Sure, and we
certain
have
individuals I know.
we have any number of brochures that explain how it works, handouts, videos are great. All right.
Mr. Chairman. Lynn, we don't have any movie theaters. I'm just letting you know that.
I walked into that one. All right, so the Diverging Diamond will open in December, and the remainder of the project is scheduled to open in the July timeframe of next year. All of this is weather permitting, but we just wanted to give you an update that traffic should be open in the next few months. The Ferry Road intersection improvement project is scheduled, I just saw you perk up, is scheduled to open in the December timeframe. The contractor was moving significantly faster than expected, and so because the timeframe to get the new poles for that signal, the traffic pattern looks like it's open, all the paint is down, but because the existing signal cannot accommodate the double lefts, that's why only one left turn lane is open right now, just because the existing poles can't accommodate that. So those are in the works. We expect to have that done by the end of the calendar year. The Chatham Bridge Superstructure Improvement Project, we have that scheduled to begin in May of 2020. It's estimated to be a 16-month replacement, so for clarification, the substructure will remain, so you'll have basically anything vertical will stay where it is, and the horizontal surfaces are scheduled to be completely replaced. So that's scheduled. It's been moving up significantly based on the condition of the bridge. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so Ms. Keenan, there is a comment regarding when you're coming off of Hanson Avenue that traffic will be restricted there, and it doesn't make sense, and maybe you can help explain it, where you won't be allowed to cut across Route 1, I guess, to go down through the city in anticipation of cutting across Chatham. Are you familiar with that?
So there are several of detours that are being put forward officially, and we have a number of improvement projects to accommodate those detours that are underway right now. The Dixon Street ramp has some improvements to accommodate additional traffic.
Right.
We do have some presentations that we can show to you. I would have to defer to the contract staff on that one.
Okay.
But there are some new traffic patterns that are being proposed just to take the additional capacity of traffic that would be diverted as a result of this.
Okay, it's just that Route 1 is so far from Chatham, so maybe if, at some point, if we could get clarification on that would
Absolutely.
be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. So we have some coordination that VDOT has been doing with the City of Fredericksburg, and we're working with Stafford County staff to make sure that their staff is also included in that communication so that we're all aware of the timeframes that are coming forward and the steps that we're taking. So as mentioned, we are working on the FY21 resurfacing schedule. I was not able during infrastructure to talk about some of our alternative pavement types, but I'm happy to come back in November to discuss that further. We're trying to look at some innovative ways of stretching our budget a little bit further, so not everybody would be receiving the pristine hot mix asphalt that we've been rolling. But we're looking to try to stretch that budget a little further and do some more preventative maintenance that would improve the quality of the roads and extend their life cycle. To Mr. Cavalier's point, we have ordered.
One question first
Yes.
on that ceiling
Yes, sir.
What I understand about that is that you apply the sealant to roads that are in good condition so that they will stay in good condition for a longer period of time. And so what I've been telling people based upon, our comprehensive road study and working with VDOT earlier was that we would widen and repave the roads, and specifically Decatur Road coming up in 2020 here. I'm hoping that we're not just going to start doing the sealing in lieu of the paving, but especially on roads that are not in good condition. You're saying, yes, you're not going to do that, right?
I'm very clear that Decatur Road is being treated with plant mix asphalt, so it is not one of the ones that we are looking to use Cape Seal or chip seal as an alternative.
Thank you.
So to your point earlier about the commuter lots, we have created new signage that we are putting in all of the commuter lots in the Fredericksburg residency that note that vehicles left unattended for more than 10 days will be towed by Virginia State Police at the owner's expense.
Is that the maximum or the shortest period of time? I mean, if I had an RV, I could park it there for 10 days and then move it somewhere and then come back a few hours later and start the clock over?
So
Can't we limit parking of RVs in those recreational type trailers, period?
So working with Virginia State Police because of their relatively limited number of resources, and I would defer to them if they want to speak on their own behalf, but we notice a lot of vehicles, and we've called them repeatedly to have them towed. Because of their staffing, they asked that we put a time frame that they deemed reasonable, that we deemed reasonable. We put a sign on there noting that no commercial vehicles would be allowed to be parked there. So some of the other commuter lots, we're noticing that businesses are leaving commercial vehicles. And so we tried to give ourselves and VSP a bit of a firmer ground to stand on to have those towed. So we're starting the first round of towing in the upcoming days, so we hope that that will start to get out into the community. I think because it hasn't been enforced as strictly as it was in the past, that it's kind of gotten away from us. So we're hoping with putting up more signage and getting the word out and then actually starting to tow, that people will realize this is not an alternative site to park any recreational vehicles outside of your own home.
So you'll tow after 10 days. What about ticketing? I mean, a progressive level of ticketing. Someone stays there 5 days, you put a ticket. If they're there 10 days, then you put an added ticket. I mean, to me, we're not being aggressive enough to deal with that. And pretty soon, we're just providing free parking for people who have recreational vehicles. I would also reach out to our Commissioner of the Revenue to go take down all the license plates of the RVs that are out there, because they're probably cheating the county out of tax dollars that they should be paying on those vehicles. It just, 10 days sounds so lukewarm. It's like we're asking them to accommodate. I mean, I don't know. Can we ticket them faster than 10 days? What's the state law that said, do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head. I'd have to defer to VSP. So it is something, we're taking a first step. I realize it may not be entirely what the board wants at this point, but I would say up until now, it's been just VDOT calling VSP or them noticing when vehicles, so we have something, it's a black and white sign, it's legal, and it gives us a level of support behind as well as VSP. So it gets us started. I think this is a bigger problem in some of our more congested commuter parking lots, whereas some of our other ones, like down in Spotsylvania and Caroline County, we're not seeing as big of an issue. So we're trying to put a process forward that we can enforce with the partnership we have with VSP.
Just one last comment. I think if you towed a bunch of them, it would get the message out.
And that is our goal.
Okay, thank you.
We recently completed a safety project on Truslow Road to expand the shoulder and added 18 inches of surface to the shoulder. We expanded that to try to reduce the number of accidents. So far, we haven't had any significant accidents since that was completed about 2 months ago. We're continuing to watch that and see if we need to take any more steps, such as rumble strips or additional signage. We hope that with the additional room, when you're driving it a little faster, it gives you more space to recover. We've also done some extensive patch and repaving work. So River Acres was having a heave that we just repaired, as well as Estates Drive. And we have a project on Short and Thomas to do some repaving and patching out there. And lastly, to your point, Ms. Baumke, we are still assessing the FY21 budget. Clearview has had some issues with some failures at the base level, so we're still working with Stafford County staff to figure out the underlying cause of that and decide how we move forward as a structural.
Okay, is there some kind of a timeline that you have on that project? And if there is, could you share that with me?
Yes, so VDOT and Stafford County Utilities are meeting next week to TV those lines again.
Okay, all right.
And so
there are
VDOT's mat-
various places, as you know, throughout the subdivision. So I would like to be kept abreast of all of that, because I have constituents complaining about the condition of the pavement. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes my official comments. I'll take any questions that you all have.
Any questions, Ms. Baumke?
One last thing, I wanted to make sure that you received the resolution from the Board of Supervisors regarding our request for a temporary traffic light at the intersection of Truslow Road and Route 1. Did you receive that?
We did, and our traffic engineering group reviewed that. At this time, it does not meet any of the warrants, and actually with the projected traffic volumes due to the closure of the Truslow Bridge, it is expected to have even less traffic on it. So in our discussions with traffic engineering, it was not supported as something that would be warranted at this time.
Okay, so while it doesn't have the warrants, I totally understand that. Whether the bridge is up or down, the warrants aren't there. But our concern is about safety, making that left-hand turn there. All those people that are coming out there are going right or left, and many of them are going left to Northern Virginia, and they can't see around the curve there. So, I mean, we're not requesting a permanent light, we're requesting a temporary light just while the construction of the bridge is completed, and then we understand that would come down after the construction is complete. I mean, I feel that that's a very dangerous intersection, and I think you guys should reconsider it, not based on warrants, but based on public safety.
So I can pass that along to our traffic engineering. I will say that they had studied it pretty extensively over the past few months and not found that it met their requirements. They always say if you can't make a left, then you should make a right and make a U-turn. So,
But you can't make a U-turn because you go down to the Falmouth Light.
If I might just jump in here real quick.
Yes, sir.
I share Ms. Baumke and the board's concern there because all the buses, school buses now, come all the way through Truslow, hit Enon Road and go to Stafford High School. They will be unable to do that if they're on the other side of that bridge. They're going to have to go down Route 1 and make that left. They're not going to be able to take a right to make a U-turn. There's nowhere to make a U-turn. Plus, all the school children that are driving to school every day are going to be doing the same thing. So I would implore you guys to take another look at it. I mean, I'm not sure what else we've got to do as a board, but whatever we got to do, let us know, and we'll jump in.
okay, will do.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Baumke, go ahead.
Just very quickly, thank you for all the clearing that you did, that VDOT has done. That's quite honestly the largest complaint I've had all spring and summer and into the fall is overgrowing foliage. So thank you for that. And then you didn't mention it, but the work that you are doing with the permit issue on that same topic has been very much appreciated. So thank you all for doing that.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have questions? Ms. Shelton?
Ma'am, do you know that if we're going to have the traffic calming measures in place on Green Ridge Road by snowfall?
I'm not sure. I can look on that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Getting renewed complaints again about the traffic signal at Quantico Corporate Center. if people are coming southbound in rush hour, that backs up considerably into Prince William County there, and that after that point, the logjam breaks loose through Boswell's Corner, but that seems to be the choke point at this point, right when you cross over from Prince William into Stafford at Quantico Corporate Center. So if you could have someone take a look at the timing on that, and again, it's a rush hour southbound issue.
So that light was actually just retimed to add 2 seconds because it did not have enough capacity to allow Hildrep to get tractor trailers out of their facility. So that light was just retimed slightly to allow, it didn't have enough time for them to safely make a turn. So we had to add 2 seconds to allow sufficient capacity for a tractor trailer to exit. So
you added 2 seconds to the red light on the southbound at that time, is that what you're saying?
So we added 2 seconds to north and southbound to allow Hildrep's community, or Hildrep's tractors, trailers to make a left going southbound on Route 1 out of Corporate Drive.
Okay, there's always two sides to every issue, right?
So we can talk offline if there's another issue. That was just recently, we retimed it in the last 2
Yeah,
months.
I'm just getting general complaints from consumers or commuters, and I've had those before about that same, and I understand Hildrep's issue right there too. So, like I said, there's two sides to that. The trucks have to be able to safely enter, and the commuters need to get home. So, how we make everybody happy, I don't know.
Any other questions? I just have two real quick things. Celebrate Virginia Parkway and Banks Ford Road. We had another accident last week. And the problem is people are coming down those hills and from Banks Ford, they're not stopping for the stop sign, they're not seeing it, whatever, and just T-boning folks. We had talked about putting a light in there, and I know how hard it is to get a traffic light, but is there any way those bushes could be taken out? I mean, those bushes were put in by the developer years ago, because that seems to be a little bit of a distraction for people.
We can see about looking
Yeah,
at those.
if you could
those
look at
bushes.
that.
Mhm.
And also, could you check to see if that is still, if that warrants a traffic signal there?
Mhm.
The other quick one is this road right in front of us, where am I? That way. It's hard to deal in a room with no windows. But Hartwood District comes over on this side of Courthouse Road and comes out to Route 1. And I don't need, I'm preaching to the choir here. This traffic jam in front of this admin building every day of the week is just unbelievable. I was on 610 about 2-3 weeks ago for a meeting. It was during the week. I left that meeting at 1:30, turned on to Route 1 from 610, and arrived at this traffic signal on 6:30 at 2:40. Hour and 10 minutes. Same thing happened last week. I was in Quantico. I came back early afternoon, same thing. And it seems to me, I'm not an engineer, but the problem is with these two lights. They don't seem to be synchronized, number one, and they don't seem to be green long enough. They turn red and green, then all of a sudden they turn red again. So I don't know if you can look at that. I know you've looked at it 1,000 times before, but there's got to be an answer here. It's just very frustrating. And I only go that route about twice a year. So. Okay, anything else from Ms. Keenan? Thank you so much, Lynn. We appreciate your time. Consent agenda. Do I have approval for a motion for the consent agenda with exception of item 4?
So, second.
I have a move by Mr. Cohen and a second by Mr. Dudenheffer. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Ms. Baumke.
Yes, I just had a question about, I'm very excited about Station 14 coming online. So this is basically, and I see Mr. Granger, if you could just help answer a few questions. So we are adding to our current system where we've got 11 fire stations already on board with WestNet, and we're adding these guys. And then for Station 14, and then we're going to be going back out to rebid in December because our agreement is up. Is that correct?
Partially, ma'am. Yes. Joseph Granger, Assistant Fire Chief. Fire Station 14 is the addition of our 15th fire and EMS station to have the WestNet station alerting system included. The current contract for service does expire in December, and we're evaluating all of the potential options.
Okay. All right, and I would assume that that's probably going to go through our new procurement office?
Yes, ma'am. We've been working with both construction and the procurement office on the installation of WestNet at Fire Station 14 and our continuing options for station alerting.
Okay, so I'm just curious, since it's been a while since we added from WestNet on with a new system, although it's the same system we have at our other stations, were there any new bells and whistles that Station 14 got, just due to technology?
The interface that is included has been upgraded over the length of the time that we've had WestNet. There are no specific standalone bells and whistles added to Fire Station 14. It's a pretty basic station alerting system. But it does incorporate some of the modular improvements that we've made over time, specifically the radio interface controller backup. The fundamental station alerting occurs through either commercial cable, T1, or fiber. If that fails, the RIC, the radio interface controller, has been added so that it automatically alerts through our public safety radio network.
Oh, great, okay. All right, are you happy with it?
I am. As far as station alerting goes, I think that any of the vendors that you use, there's opportunities for improvement. But we've been working with WestNet to make sure that they are meeting our needs. And I think that the relationship has improved over the past few years, that we've been really working on it with them. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, with that, I make approval for R19-250.
Have a motion, have a second? Second by Mr. Cohen. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with one absent. Item number 16, Planning and Zoning, amend and reordain the Stafford County zoning ordinance by amending the profit conditions on portion of tax map parcel 37-25, Zone B2, urban commercial project known as Centerport Gateway. Proposed ordinance 19-43. Mr. Zaraf, I got myself confused here. I recused myself on a piece of property up there last meeting. This is not the same piece, though, is it?
I believe it is.
It is the same
It
piece,
is.
okay. I am recusing myself due to the fact that I own property that adjoins it. Mr. Dudenheffer.
Well, I'm glad you recused yourself after you read that long. Okay, Mr. Zaraf.
Yes. Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. Mike Zaraf, the Planning and Zoning Department. I'm just going to provide a brief update on proposed proffer amendment for Centerport Gateway. The public hearing was conducted on September 3rd and deferred to address issues raised by the board at that meeting. Just a quick summary of the background, the parcel subject to the proffer amendment is Zone B2 Urban Commercial currently. The purpose of the request is to modify access and use restrictions to allow more flexibility in the future development concepts that would permit more retail uses on the site. The applicant is Jacob Manovich, and Clark Lemming is the agent for this case. The site is on the south side of Centerport Parkway, just west of the 95 interchange, and the area covers 44.5 acres. One of the issues raised at the public hearing was asking staff to describe the open blank areas in the middle of the site between the retail and hotel uses. These areas represent, and it's basically all this area here. These areas represent resource protection area buffers located along two perennial streams that bisect the site and flow from north to south towards Potomac Creek. The land slopes gradually down to these streams. Development in these areas is primarily limited to utilities and perpendicular stream crossings in accordance with county code restrictions.
Mr. Cohen.
Yes, I just wanted, so when you say it's limited to utilities, and so they'll cut down all the trees and vegetation along there and put utilities in there, or is it because they're riparian streams, they're not allowed to do anything in there, so the trees will stay tall?
When they go through, and if they need to put in a utility line, they would try to limit their impact, for the area where they need to construct. So it's not like they would, and it always kind of depends on site conditions as well, on how much needs to be cleared. But there's exemptions in the county code that that allow for utility lines to be located within the resource protection area.
Right.
And then with road crossings, those generally need to be placed perpendicular to
Thank
that.
you.
Also, the applicant did provide a revised proffer statement in response to some of the comments received. The amendments did add reference to the general development plan into the proffers that would ensure that the transportation improvements that would be constructed are provided, will be provided as they're shown in the plan. Also, they corrected an error with the list of restricted uses. And also, they did modify the utilities proffer to ensure that a master water and sewer plan project that is identified is constructed, and that project is a 10-inch gravity sewer line, and so they included that into the modified proffer statement. Staff was also asked to provide a more detailed analysis of the amendments to the proffers. There was specific concern related to the cost implications to these changes. Included in the staff report in attachment 8 is an evaluation spreadsheet that staff prepared that outlines the different changes. You know, it identifies what proffers are being removed, amended, or added as a new proffer. One of the biggest changes in the proffers is the dealing with the road improvements. The proffer, as proposed, would remove a requirement to construct a 2-lane portion of Mine Road extended. In exchange, lane improvements would be constructed along Centerport Parkway. For this, the applicant submitted a cost comparison, and in that, they determined that the Centerport Parkway improvements that are proposed would exceed the Mine Road extension improvements by approximately $565,000. We did send that estimation up to Public Works. They did review the cost estimate, and they found that and determined that the estimations were accurate. The amendment also does propose and would result in the county potentially foregoing up to $100,000 towards the development of a comprehensive sector plan along Centerport Parkway and along the Mine Road extension area. I think that was all tied in with, you know, assuming Mine Road extended is built, that a sector plan would be developed. It's more kind of like an elaborate small area plan. And also, as I noted, the revised proffer regarding utilities to ensure the construction of a master plan sewer project. This improvement is an estimated value of $245,000 that would be provided by the applicant. So this is an image that shows the location of the Mine Road extension that's reflected in the current proffers. That's the yellow shaded line heading down, heading to the south from the current alignment of Centerport Parkway. That's approximately 2,400 feet of roadway. And access under the current proffers would be near the southern end or bottom of that line into the site. So under the proposed proffers, this image highlights the proposed lane improvements that are proposed by the applicant to Centerport Parkway. This is a section of the future sewer improvement map out of the water and sewer master plan. The required improvement is the 10-inch gravity sewer line that I've referenced. It's the red line in the center. It's identified as project LFR 51, and the subject parcel is highlighted in yellow. That segment of sewer line is 1,000 feet in length. So staff recommended approval of the application with the proffered conditions. And on July 10th, the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend approval, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Cohen?
One of the questions that I had, and I appreciate you answered one chunk of it, but it was about the hotel. So do we know how many stories? And maybe I just couldn't read this weekend, but I don't remember seeing it.
It's shown on the general development plan as a 6-story hotel. And
And then if you go back to the computer, to the map that's, keep going back a slide, Don't- backslide, there you go. Nope, one more. Yeah, I see where the parcel is. Do we know if anything's slated to be back behind there? I know we have some homes along the road, but there's this big.
in this area?
I don't know what name it is. Yes, any of that. Because that's where the 6-story hotel is going to be looking on.
Right.
And so
There are no plans in at this
Okay.
point on
All
that
right.
land.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thanks, Mike. There being none, I guess we'll move, and since Mr. Snellings has recused himself, I'll go ahead and make a motion for approval of R 19-43.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I like 99.9% of it, but I don't like the hotel part, and I didn't really get much information about why we're putting the hotel in the middle of 2 riparian areas and putting the road across. And so for that reason, I'm just have consternation about it. I understand, I think we need to put stuff down there. I'm in favor of business, but I just don't see why we're putting a 6-story hotel in a tiny little diamond there, right adjacent against other people's property. It reminds me of something that was up in, we were looking at a multi-story office building that was going to be along, not Mine Road, but up in your area, that was going to be looking down in people's homes or in other people's property, and it just caused a lot of problem in the planning commission. So I'll reluctantly vote no, but it's just because of the hotel.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, I guess, going back to Mr. Zaraf, so what is that piece of property right behind the hotel that Mr. Cohen asked about? What is that piece of property zoned?
It's zoned agricultural, so they'd have to come in for.
Do we have any idea have you guys had conversations in planning and zoning with anybody that owns that property?
I have not. I believe there was years ago like an A1 subdivision on one of the properties, but not all of those.
Okay, I see Mr. Harvey sitting halfway up in his seat. Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
Madam Chairman, board members, as Mr. Zaraf was referring to previously, we had a proposal for a subdivision to be located on this particular piece of property. The owner of that property also owns this piece of property, which is zoned residential. In discussions with him, he's aware that we have master planned the new roadway to come through his property, generally in that alignment. He's not come forward with any specific plans, but is looking forward to seeing additional development in the area.
Okay.
I think it's common knowledge that that's going to all be a commercial site, that
Right.
we're emphasizing that area for that.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? There being none, we'll go ahead and please cast your vote. Motion passes 4-1 with 1 abstain and 1 absent. We'll let Mr. Snellings get back in place here.
Okay, continuing with unfinished business, item number 17, economic development. Consider approving the economic development incentive agreement for First Line Technology. Mr. Holden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I want to give you, this was presented back on September 3rd as new business. I want to give you a brief recap of this project and answer any questions. Since that date, the actual MOU or incentive agreement has been structured and agreed upon in principle by the company and our staff. So this is a company that was First Line Technologies was established in 2003. I do have the president here. He's going to ask for a brief comment in a moment. They manufacture disaster preparedness equipment and materials. This is a growing market in our world, unfortunately. They are ISO certified. They have just recently become one of the 5,000 fastest growing companies on the Inc. 2019. They're a small minority-owned business. They do R&D and develop new technologies and are proposing to create and maintain at least 19 new jobs in Stafford County. They make a number of products, one of which is called Ambubus. This is a product that they assemble and put together that converts vans and buses into emergency vehicles and has been used in a number of disaster areas just recently, as a matter of fact. They make also their most recent product, of which they want to do more testing and development and manufacturing here in Stafford, is the product that synthesizes and protects first responders from opioid situations. It's a spray-on material, and they make the materials that react with the dangerous material and make it safe for the first responders. So Stafford was identified by the company. They did a search of the Fredericksburg regional area, and they identified this particular property in Stafford, among others, and decided this was the best property in the community they wanted to be in. Again, I want to emphasize this is a company that does technology transfer. They take new technology, primarily out of Dahlgren, and convert it to new products that are used in the commercial space. They are a manufacturing company. They are an expanding and growing business, and they work closely with local colleges and universities as they develop this product and create new jobs. The incentive agreement is such. The company intends to take ownership of 487 Lendell Lane. Although it hasn't been closed upon, that itself is about a $1.5 million investment by the company to purchase and improve that property. They then will invest and bring new business personal property to Stafford County. The estimate is $1.35 million worth of new equipment over 5 years. In turn, they will also intend to create 19 new jobs over that 5 years. These are well-paid manufacturing and in some case R&D technology jobs and administrative jobs. The incentive is thus, the Stafford Economic Development Authority has voted to approve up to $25,000 to the company to reimburse them for permit costs of getting the building ready for their use, as well as a CUP if required. The incentive goes further to say that the EDA and the county, the EDA would grant an amount equal to 50% of new tax revenue generated by the business personal property over 5 years. Now that's scaled in and the percentages vary by year, as you've seen in your package, and that requires job requirements per year, and it requires them to, of course, pay those taxes so they can get a portion of that granted back to them by the EDA. The incentive agreement is also designed to reimburse the EDA for its upfront cash incentive on the permits. So that's the summary. Again, I'm trying to be a little bit brief, recognizing a ball game later. But I'd also like, if the board wouldn't mind, to just reintroduce the president, Mr. Kafur, to add a brief comment. Okay.
Thanks, John, and thank you, everybody, for letting me come out and speak. We're excited about, finding a new location for our office. We've been based out of Chantilly, Virginia, for about 12 years now, and we've been growing. We're moving from 4,500 square feet. This would give us about 18,000 square feet of space, and continuing to grow and be very strong for not just the upcoming 5 years, but for longer than that. When we find a home to move into, we are going to be there for a long period of time, especially bringing in high-end manufacturing jobs and high-end R&D. We're looking to build a strong facility to be out of. The location is great for us, especially this whole area, especially with our relationship with Dahlgren and a couple of other universities that we work with. And our customer base is out of DC and out of the Virginia Beach area, special operations side. So middle of the area on 95, so it's ideal for us. So we look forward to it. We're very excited. All the employees are very excited about a new home, a new location, shifting a lot of jobs down here. And so we look forward. And if anybody has any questions, I'm open to answer any.
Any questions? Ms. Baumke?
Yes.
I'm very excited for you. My question is actually
Sure, no problem.
with the EDA, and I didn't see this in the write-up, I know the EDA was working for a while on coming up with criteria for their grants. And this was probably 9 months ago when I had a conversation with my EDA appointee. Have they come up with criteria, do you know? And is that how they were selected to use this money towards this particular business?
Yes, the EDA has passed a policy on their grants, loans, and what are called major investment programs, 3 different categories. This technically falls under the major investment program category and is not a grant to the type you're asking about. But they have clarified those, but this does not fall under that category.
Okay, that's great. All right, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Holden? Thank you, sir. I'll bring it back to the board. Let me clarify something real quick. Don't let my comments earlier about the ball game rush you. This is very important business for our county, and take all the time you need, believe me.
Not till 8.
I know, we got, plus they got VCRs now, we can tape this thing, Okay, Mr. Cohen, this is your district.
Yes, I enthusiastically move for R19-281.
Second?
I have a motion by Mr. Cohen, a second by Ms. Baumke. Are there any further discussion?
Welcome to Stafford County.
Anything else?
Let us know what we can do if you need anything. Call Mr. Cohen.
Cast your votes. Tally the vote. The vote passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Welcome to Stafford, sir. We look forward to the ribbon cutting.
Thank you.
Item number 18, discuss Stafford County 2020 General Assembly Legislative Program, presented by Mr. Toigo, County Administration, and Julia Hammond of Cousin and O'Connor.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Anthony Toigo of County Administration, Constituent and Legislative Affairs Officer, and I'm joined today by Julia Hammond of the firm Cousin O'Connor in Richmond, who represents us before the General Assembly. Can I have the computer, please? Thank you. So this has traditionally been a pretty lengthy presentation. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Snellings. I promise I'll only take a few hours. So, right up to the game. So, talking a little bit about the General Assembly session and what to expect for 2020. So, it begins on January 8th of this coming year. It is a 60-day session. Traditionally in Virginia, that means it is a budget year. So, the FY 20 to 22 biennium will be considered this coming year. Now, I do want to underscore the next bullet. This is an election year. Every seat in a GA is up for election. And if there's one thing that VACO kind of hammered in everyone's minds at their conference over the summer was, elections breed uncertainty. We do not know what either house of the General Assembly will look like. We do not know what type of government we're going to have, and our success rate on some of our bills could be caught up in the politics of it all. So just to keep that in mind. Otherwise, pre-filing of legislation begins on November 18th, and the Legislative Committee did meet on September 3rd to consider this legislative program. So you should have in front of you at the dais a copy of our General Assembly program this year. So this year, this program's look and feel has been vastly updated. So we have our top initiatives highlighted right at the top, but every other item in this program is aligned to your strategic plan. So as we move through the presentation, you'll see that, but the goal is to have it all tie together. Other jurisdictions also have comprehensive programs, and under each page of this program and each initiative, there is not only the specific request of the General Assembly, but also what our position is in the form of an executive summary. So each page, each plank doubles as a position paper. So the board is encouraged to adopt a concise number of initiatives and align when possible with partner organizations. That's just for maximizing lobby purposes. So without further ado, we'll go into our top initiatives for 2020, as recommended and discussed at Legislative Committee. So number one, far and away, there was a comment made at Legislative Committee, this might be our top issue, period, is the state reimbursement for disabled veterans, tax relief. So this would request the General Assembly provide financial reimbursement to localities, providing real estate tax relief to disabled veterans where 1% or more of their tax base is being exempted. So the most recent data that Scott Mayoski's office, our Commissioner of Revenue, provided, we currently have about 1,230 households receiving real estate tax relief under this program, and that exoneration is equal to $4.6 million currently, which is about 3% of our real estate tax base. We do expect that number to grow over time, and I'm working with Scott right now to get data statewide through his association about what this looks like for other jurisdictions. So number two is our public day school funding. I think enough has been said about this. We've tried and tried every year to get this farther, and we come close every time. Our difficulty has been traditionally in House Appropriations, but in short, we have a great day school program in conjunction with our school system. Our goal is to get it funded. The third one, powers of auxiliary police personnel. I know Sheriff Decatur and Major Kimmitz are here with the Sheriff's Office. I'll allow them to comment on this momentarily. But last year, as you know, we got very far with our school protection officer initiative until it got to the governor where it was vetoed, principally because of concerns about creating a new class of officer and defining those duties. So auxiliary police personnel, what this would do is allow the sheriff to call into service auxiliary deputies to work inside the school systems. So it's kind of a quick way around what we were trying to do last year. And it gives more authority to the sheriff. So that way the governor can't come back and say, oh, well, you're just creating a new category of officer. No, we're doing this internally with our own resources. So I don't know, Sheriff Decatur, if you'd like to say a few words, or Major Kimmitz.
Certainly. Sean Kimmitz, the operations major for the Sheriff's Office. We were excited. Sheriff Decatur was finally able to hire our third school protection officer, so we're now fully staffed in that department. What this would really let us do is to bring on new recruits who have experience in law enforcement and be able to train them in 6 to 8 weeks instead of the 20 weeks the academy is taking. So it's going to shorten that length of time. We could eliminate a lot of the requirements such as DUI enforcement, just things that aren't going to be needed for a school protection officer. Of course, we would keep in the weapons qualifications, the legal qualifications, that sort of thing, use of force. But there's a lot of things in that 20 weeks we could eliminate because these officers, their sole objective is to protect those children at the elementary school level. With us being fully staffed, if we ever wanted to add more to this initiative, this would allow us to hire people that are qualified, get them trained up quickly without putting them through the full academy. So that's our goal here. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions, Major Kimmitz? Mr. Cavalier?
Just one, and this is not for you, Major Kimmitz, but for Julia and Anthony. In the background information under executive summary, we still have just 2 of the 3 positions filled, so if we could update that to all 3 are now filled.
Absolutely, and in talking with the Sheriff's Office, I think there's been some pretty good success with this program, so the anticipation is that it will grow in the future. So I'll make a note.
I have a question. Jack or Gary?
Yes, Ms. Bowles.
So is VACO on board with this?
I have not had conversations with VACO yet, but they did support our SPO initiative last year, so I would presume they'd be
think that they
favorable
would,
to it.
especially in the rural counties where they don't have the resources even to do all the training of the 20 weeks, even if they wanted to. So I would think, I see Julia behind you.
They were supportive of our initiatives last year. This is a little bit of a switch from it, so we wanted to wait and see if the board was going to accept our new way of doing it. But yes, we expect VACO, VML, the Sheriff's Association, School Boards Association, everyone to join on and support.
Okay, great, thanks.
And Mr. Chairman?
Cavalier.
And Meg, are you going to do another workshop out there at VACO this year on this issue, or
We can. We're in the process right now of coming up with those workshops that are what they're going to be. So, yes, we definitely could.
See, the sheriff has stepped to the podium. Welcome, Sheriff.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, David Decatur, Sheriff of Stafford County. Last week, we were in a closed session with the school board talking about the recommendations that our school safety task force came up with. And during that meeting, the school board had told us they were very happy with the School Protection Officers Program, and they'd like to move forward with the program in the future. And I told them that I would relay that information to you as well.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Major Kimmons.
So moving on to our number 4 of our top 5, exemption of stormwater facilities from open space requirements. This has come up in the past. In 2018, actually, Delegate Thomas carried a bill, HB 341, which was tabled in House County, Cities, and Towns, and that would have prohibited stormwater management facilities from being located within open space and/or conservation areas of a cluster subdivision. I know that as part of our cluster ordinance discussions, we did try to prohibit that locally, but I believe we were challenged on that. So now would be a good time to go back to the General Assembly and re-engage on this issue. And then lastly, as an item Ms. Maurer brought to our attention that was in our program last year, the HOA property transfer trigger point. So this would allow localities to withhold developer securities or bonds for housing development until 100% of common areas are transferred from the developer to the HOA, and 100% of property transfers identified in a development's proffer statement are complete. This also requests that the party responsible for common area pays taxes up until date of transfer. This came out of several older subdivisions. I know in the Rock Hill District, there was also one in Griffiths Widewater, Oak Ridge, I believe, I was contacted about, where you have, let's say, trees that fall from these properties, or a stormwater issue, and there's no responsible maintenance party to go in and fix them. While this legislation would not rectify those situations from that have happened in the past, this could take steps to mitigate those from occurring in the future. So those are our top 5. I'll stop and take questions briefly in case the board has any thoughts.
Any questions? Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dudenhofer.
Okay. Anthony, have you looked at what the schools brought by earlier?
Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to look at that in detail. We only got that earlier. I know that at least a couple items from our program, which I'll get to momentarily, are in there. I've glanced over it, but I have not had a chance to take an in-depth look at it.
Mr. Cavalier, oh, I'm sorry.
It just looks like a lot of additional funding, like cost of competing, which we've addressed a million times. Elimination of 2009 support staff cap, that I don't see where we have much of a play with that. Increase in established necessary state funding for mandated pre-K programs for 2, 3, and 4-year-old students. Have we ever talked about that? I don't recall.
Not to my knowledge.
No, we need to look at some of these, but they kind of dropped them on us at the last minute. I mean, we're out of time, so.
Mr. Cavalier.
Anthony, I sent you and Julia copies of this email from Friends of Whitewater State Park, and there's a discrepancy in the capital funding numbers between what your initiative says and what the Friends say. They say $27.2 million for Phase 2 construction, and you have 8.2. So can you explain that?
So that was the first I've heard of 27 million. I am going to get to that slide later in the presentation because the request for capital funding itself is included as part of our program. The 8.2 number was provided by Paul Anderson via DCR. I worked on him with some of the background language, so I'll be happy to look into that. When we get to that slide, Julia, you might be able to address it better than I could. So.
Well, they've sliced that up so many times, but you got to take it in chunks that are palatable for the bigger budget. We're much more likely to get 8 million than 20. We'll never get 27 million. So it's we need to be acceptable for us to move small pieces at a time, and then look back at the total at the end.
Okay. And alternatively, if there's a desire to just remove that 8.2 million number entirely out of the program, we could just do that, and that'll give us some flexibility in case the number is higher.
Can we find out if DCR intends to put this in their budget? Can you know that, Julia?
It's at the secretary level right now, the decision on that. We don't know if it's going to make it into the final budget yet, but the number was sent to the secretary's office.
The 8 million.
It's my understanding the numbers, plural, were sent for everything that's left to do as options.
But
So
it
8
would
million
have
being
been
the first.
DCR's calculation of what the numbers are, right?
Correct,
Not
sir.
what any outside group believes that number should be.
Correct, sir. But once we know what it is, we can work with the group and get letters of support to the governor's office explaining why they think the larger number is more important.
But you hadn't heard this $27 million figure yet. I don't know, I didn't see any research on how they got that number, so.
That might be the total for completion of everything there at the park, but for just
But
the
so if we
phase
can just
two.
kind of leave it to be resolved here without putting in a specific number at this point.
But if it's a portion of the total for Phase 2, before Clyde and DCR and those guys start chopping up and deciding what we need to put in, we need to let the Friends of the Widewater and this board and have some participation in the priority list of the things they're going to do. I mean, we've been promising a pier out into to the Potomac for quite some time. We need to get that access to the Potomac River. That's
Certainly, we can
probably
reach out
outside
to them to see what kind of communications they've had so far. Maybe they have the most updated numbers.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Mr. Cohen and then Ms. Bomke.
Just a procedural question. So are we going to go forward with the 5 top ones mainly, or the 5 top ones and then the rest of the packet moving forward?
As in the presentation, Mr. Cohen?
No, I
or-
mean in general, when we start pushing it on our legislators, which horse are we going with? 1 or 2?
It would be the entire program. However, the top 5, the board has traditionally done in the past, and granted, the board can choose to do this however way they would prefer, in order to say, these are our top 5 issues that the board feels are most prudent, and the ones we want to push for the absolute most. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to bring up with everybody, and maybe Julia and Anthony might have some perspective, but one of the things that we don't have control over right now is vaping in our public buildings. And so, do you know, has that received any traction in the state? I know there was some legislation about it.
I'll defer to Julia. I was preparing to actually insert that into the rest of the presentation, so we can address that, but I'll let Julia
Okay.
speak.
I'm sorry, I was actually texting someone at DCR. What was the?
My question was about vaping. I had a constituent that asked me, hey, I ran into somebody that was vaping in the Rouse Center, and is vaping allowed? And we don't have an ordinance against it because it is not considered nicotine. It doesn't fall in the same category as cigarettes.
So as we've looked at it, and I know a lot of jurisdictions are looking at it too, the Virginia Indoor Clean Air Act does not include vaping. It has to smoke, there has to be some sort of ignition of the product. It also has to be tobacco. It specifically talks about tobacco, and obviously there are other things that are being put into the cylinders for vaping. So no, the Virginia Indoor Clean Air Act does not currently cover it, and there is a lot of discussion, and not just for local governments on how to do it. There are other nonprofit groups, Boys and Girls Clubs, et cetera, that are asking for that. I wouldn't be surprised if the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth, which has been working on tobacco and tobacco reduction and other healthy lifestyle changes for children, don't somehow get involved. They are, as you know, under the office of the governor too. So there is a lot of discussion around it.
Okay, well, that's good. We probably don't need to include it then as one of our initiatives. It sounds like somebody else is really going to probably push that.
I am positive that there will be legislation. It'll come
Exactly.
before you all for an opinion on it. So whether it's included or not, you'll definitely get your say.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, I do have the rest of the presentation to go through by strategic priority, so I'm happy to do that or take any further questions about these 5.
Go ahead and move on with the presentation.
Moving on then. So we'll go through each of the strategic priorities and the initiatives associated with them. So first of all, under healthy growth, the board has seen these before. The timbering issue, which is prevalent in Widewater right now, I will say that Mr. Cavalier and I have been in contact. I received a call from the state forester at DCR. We're going to set up a time to talk with him next week. That would require a permit for timber harvest, more restrictions on clear cutting near stream sides, and also add a replanting requirement. Otherwise, preliminary subdivision plans, that would require, that's from the Planning Commission. They suggested this one. That would require plan review for new subdivisions consisting of 50 or fewer lots. Currently, that review is not required. Stormwater drainage, this is also from the Planning Commission. It's a request for DEQ to examine stormwater runoff reductions in order to mitigate drainage from infill development, which is especially prevalent in older areas. Wireless communications infrastructure, a couple years ago, there was a big push at the state level for the by right approval of communications towers up to 50 feet in height in public rights-of-way. As part of that legislation, which was signed into law by Governor Northam, the administrative review process, the public hearing process for those towers was removed. So the Planning Commission felt it was prudent to add that back in, and that's why it's in our program. The next is probably the one I want to spend the most time on this slide, Watershed Improvement Plan Phase 3 funding. Thank you, Ms. Baumke, for bringing this to my attention and for giving me an opportunity to work with Public Works, Jason Towery especially, on how this impacts Stafford. So the board, I'm sure, is aware, but in 2010, President Obama signed an executive order for pollution reductions to the Chesapeake Bay's total maximum daily load, or TMDL. So that required nutrient reductions for nitrogen and phosphorus amounts. VACO has expressed some concerns over funding and implementation of the next phase of the Watershed Improvement Plan, which is WIP 3. Basically, there's no funding in the current biennium for it. And also, this is an enormous cost burden on the wastewater sector in the form of facility upgrades. So as far as how it affects Stafford County, we would need upgrades to our Little Falls Run wastewater treatment plant to the tune of $9.2 million in the utility fund. We do have that budgeted in FY23. But our staff's concern is that's a pretty large amount of money for a very small amount of nitrogen reductions. We're not far off from meeting WIP 3, if I understand right, Jason. Yeah, he's shaking his head. So we also are concerned that the cost of these improvements could pass to citizens in a form of a rate increase. So our request is to require full funding of WIP 3 in the FY20 to 22 biennium. So. Mr. Cohn?
And it's not sort of those, but one of the issues, and Jason and I have gone back and forth on this, and I think Ms. Baumke and Ms. Maurer and Mr. Dudenhofer, I think we all have problems with the water runoff and damages. And so one of the things that I was hoping that we would discuss or look into is to do something similar to what we do with the dams for helping our localities that the HOAs cannot possibly afford to deal with the damage from runoff. I mean, we're looking at one that's $800,000 that they cannot possibly get a loan to fix, but they'd be willing to pay a tax to pay it, so these service districts. So if you can look into that. I just thought this has been something that's hit us every year, even before I got on the board, and then we've heard from the other parts of the state. I would think that the little loan program or grant program is not sufficient to meet the real costs that these have to deal with. So if you could look into that, I'd appreciate it, because I think that's something the legislature needs to deal with.
Sure thing.
So, Mr. Shannon. So the long and the short of it is the Commonwealth of Virginia, most localities in the WIP 3 area have met, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or pretty darn close to meeting their requirements. The problem is Pennsylvania and New York are not doing their fair share. And so I personally think, like this Little Falls Run, this is ridiculous. And so that's why we need to be pushing hard on this. And it's just not us. I mean, I know Ruby Bravo out in King George is really leading this pack as well, since she works with the EPA and DEQ very closely. But this is going to get a lot of traction. And we've done our fair share and more. So, you know, if the state's not going to fund it, we really need to push back.
Understood. I think it's pretty clear we definitely want to keep this at our forefront. So moving on from healthy growth over to response.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Tuigo. I was just waiting my turn.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
I just wanted to echo what Mr. Cohen was saying, because I was hoping that with our service districts with 15.2.2402 last year, we had started off looking at broadband and stormwater management, but as I remember, we dropped it because we didn't want to convolute the conversation. So that is, I think, to his point, a really good place to be able to put that. And so I don't know if we can fit that in now. In addition, I also wanted to say, I do not support the preliminary subdivision plan, and primarily because I think that we have bad actors or individuals that are circumventing our code, and I see that that's a value to us changing it, but I really think that we could have found something that was not so detrimental. What is the cost to our businessmen to be able to have to do a preliminary plan? Because wouldn't they have to do it if they just did a subdivision lot for one?
I'd have to defer to Jeff Harvey on that.
Okay, well, that's the reason I'm not supporting it, is because of that. Okay, thank you.
So I'll move forward with responsive transportation system. So we've got one initiative under responsive transportation system. The Planning Commission suggested we try to work to amend the metrics of smart scale to include traffic counts for all 7 days of the week. In the legislative committee meeting, it was discussed we should add a second prong to this. So one of the smart scale metrics concerns a project area's area of influence for employment access. Currently under smart scale, that is a 45-mile radius. Stafford, as you know, is 45 miles, I'd say, from where we are in the county seat, directly south of Washington, D.C. So that bisects our county a little bit. If you're on the north side, you would be included, but let's say if you're coming from 133, where you're about 10 miles farther south on 95, you wouldn't be included. So that's something that the legislative committee felt strongly about we should add to our initiative. So heartbeat, history, recreation, and culture, we have already discussed capital funding for Widewater. Mr. Cavalier, I understand. I'll just remove the amount from that, and we'll do some research on our end to see where the financial discrepancies are. And then recreational amenities for new subdivisions. Ms. Shelton, I know you'd like me to bring this one up. But this was a request from the Planning Commission. Under by right development currently, localities are not permitted to require recreational amenities. So this would change the code in order for those recreational amenities to be allowed at the local level. So moving on to quality educational opportunities, I know Ms. Hazard hit earlier on the cost of competing funds adjustment. That has made its way into our program. That is a request to reevaluate and adjust Stafford's current designation as a recipient of 25% of COCA. So that is in our program. Also, teacher pay consistent with national average. This is one Mr. Cavalier brought to our attention last year. In the executive summary, it shows a National Education Association report which details the average salary for a teacher in school year 2017 to 2018 was about $60,000. During that same period in Virginia, it was about $56,000. So there's a little bit of difference there. Julia might be able to speak to this a little better, but I've heard that both sides of the aisle are making teacher salaries a priority in the campaign this fall. Vibrant and exciting business community. This one is one that we're going to want to watch as time goes on. Data center tax incentives. If I can find my place on my thing here. State lawmakers are monitoring this issue. So basically, a couple years ago, the General Assembly created a separate tax classification for equipment used in data centers. Earlier this year, the board followed suit and adopted a rate of $1.25 per $100 of assessed value for data center equipment. Currently in Stafford, we only have one small data center, but given state's concerns, the state is concerned about loss of revenue, uncollected revenue, and sales and use tax exemptions. They're studying the impacts in effort to potentially cap or reduce these types of incentives, which could hurt Stafford in terms of the prospects we seek to attract, as well as the Commonwealth at large. I will say, when I spoke to the legislative committee about this previously, myself and John Holden in Economic Development were approached by the Northern Virginia Technology Council, who is definitely supportive of keeping current initiatives the same, or incentives the same. So this is one I think maybe VACO might want to take the lead on, but it is provided in here because it does have the impact to be significant to Stafford. Dedicated and responsive public safety teams. So I think the board is familiar with the definition of criminal prostitution from our massage parlor issue. I won't spend too much time on that one, but while we did enact penalties locally, there is currently not a definition of that activity in state code, nor is there a penalty. So the Sheriff's Office asked that we continue to keep this in our program in effort to aid with human trafficking concerns in the Commonwealth. And then the next one here is a new one that came from our building department, the use of door locking mechanisms. This would permit the use and installation of door locking mechanisms in public buildings for security purposes. So these are devices which are inserted at the bottom of a door in an interior room to prevent entry from the outside in, and primarily they're used in shelter-in-place scenarios. The Building Code of Virginia currently does not allow for the use of these, so some states, Illinois being one, have started allowing these on a very limited basis, but I know our staff has had conversations with state building folks in Richmond, and they've been open to possibly changing the law to at least explore the use of these. So definitely something we would want to consider in this day and age when safety is a big concern. Oh, and I'm sorry. Oh, I did hit them both. And then lastly, organizational excellence. As part of our resolution for our legislative program over the last several years, we've always had a whereas clause about how the county is opposed to unfunded mandates. In reviewing this, I felt that we need a little bit more attention in our opposition, or to our opposition to unfunded mandates, particularly mandates from the state that do not come with accompanying and support funding. So this is just there to reiterate that position and to say Stafford really does not like unfunded mandates. And then lastly, BZA certification and training. This is a request from the Board of Zoning Appeals for training to be provided and funded by the Commonwealth as needed through the, actually not as needed, through the first quarter of any calendar year through VCU's certified Board of Zoning Appeals program. So that is the end of the program. As far as our next steps go, so the board's free to discuss today, or this item will come back on unfinished business on the 15th for adoption. I will go ahead and take any changes that have been suggested and work on them a little bit and bring them back to the board at our next meeting. After the program's been adopted, Coase and O'Connor will work on pre-filing of legislation, and then we have our delegation dinner on Thursday, November 21st from 5:30 to 7 p.m. right here in ABC. So with that, I'll take any further questions.
Any questions? I think they've all been asked. Very thorough, very, very good report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did an excellent job, both of you. Thank you so much for being here, Julia.
Thank you very much.
Item number 19, Fire and Rescue and Sheriff discuss public safety salary scale. Sheriff Decatur.
Make it quick, Sheriff.
I'm going to make it quick.
We got plenty of time, Sheriff.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you so much, David Decatur, Sheriff of Stafford County, and I'm here with my partner, Chief Granger, and we're here representing both the Stafford County Sheriff's Office and Fire and Rescue, and we're here to do a quick presentation on the overview of the need to continue to move forward on our public safety pay scale. And I just want to tell you on the front end, we were both talking about how grateful both of our departments are for all the support that you give public safety and the work that you've done so far to help us with our pay, and it's helping with retention, and we're so grateful for that, to have that support, and I wanted to thank you for that. So to continue to stabilize our personnel levels, both in the Sheriff's Office and with Fire and Rescue, and to increase our competitiveness with other areas around us, with retention and recruitment as it relates to hiring. We've been collaborating and working with the county and the county administrator, Mr. Foley, and his staff, and trying to come up with structures and cost and methods and implementation for moving forward with a public safety pay scale. And it's really important for public safety because of the nature of how we operate and the mandates with training and all. There's a number of reasons why, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But just starting out with the presentation, you know, we have a number of, I hate to say problems, but there are challenges. With one, we're in such a competitive market, and geographically speaking, where we're located here in Stafford County, you know, we have a number of agencies that we compete with up north. And so that makes it challenging for us. And then the recruitment and retention continues to be a challenge, even though we had an increase with pay, which has been very beneficial. And in my department, I've seen a huge impact with that so far. But we still need to continue to be aggressive with the recruitment and retention. And there's other agencies around us who we compete with up north who they're being very proactive and they're being aggressive, and they're also moving forward. If they have an open-end pay scale, open range pay scale, a lot of them are moving either to a hybrid or they're moving to a step type of system. So they're continuing to be aggressive with it as well. And the challenge is, and you've heard it before in some of the public safety committee meetings when we've talked about across the nation, applications for both fire and rescue and the sheriff's office have dropped drastically. So everyone's competing for a small pool of applicants, and then trying to get through the process to get people through the background portion really shrinks that pool down as well. So when you couple that along with where we're at geographically, competing with federal law enforcement and Prince William Loud and all the other agencies that both our departments are competing with, it makes it very challenging. And then the cost, when we lose people, there's a cost associated with that and the effort that we put into it. And also on an operational end, there's some vulnerabilities that are created with that. We've made a lot of progress, though, and again, I want to thank you for that progress. Just as one example, with our Emergency Communications Center, our telecommunicators, back in August of 2017, I came before the board, and I told you about our plight with telecommunicators leaving and the challenges with that. And you all provided a retention contract for our telecommunicators in our Emergency Communications Center, which helped a great deal. Then we moved forward with a study in the fall of 2017, and then it was implemented after the study, where we found we were like 29% below market. And after we were able to make the pay adjustments there, we started seeing a decrease in our vacancies, which is a great thing. So that is some great progress we made. And then along with the overall pay study that the county just underwent, has been a big benefit as well, repositioning people in grades and creating a more competitive market and structure for us as well has helped out. And along with the fact that it improved our starting salary, that's helped out a great deal. And it's allowed us to incorporate incentives for people with experience, bringing them from other departments. And then on top of that, the COLA that all the county employees received. So there's been a lot of great progress. And then for my department in particular, we were able to integrate the career development into our pay structure. So instead of being a separate stipend, it was integrated into our pay. And what that allows is when you get to retirement, your retirement is based on your three top pays, and that's a huge benefit as well. We were able to reap the benefits of getting two positions for recruitment. We haven't filled them yet, but we are seeing a lot of progress, and our vacancy rate is starting to shrink down. But we know we have to continue to be proactive, and that's why we want to go to the public safety pay scale. And with fire and rescue, they were able to increase advanced life support incentive pay, which is a good thing. And then fire and rescue also, they modified the recruit school, and they improved their employee training for certified individuals. Some of the challenges that we're receiving from other jurisdictions, as I've mentioned, they're being aggressive with their plans moving forward and raising the pay. They're creating bonus packages for their people. There's incentive pay that they're building in. So we're always competing, and they're being aggressive as well. And another thing that they're trying to do is to accelerate their employees' ability to get to the max end of the scale. And then they're also doing a number of things with their structure. And then the question that comes up, why do we compare ourselves to Northern Virginia? And there's a number of reasons why. One, our community issues are very common with Northern Virginia as it relates to traffic and growth and the public safety challenges and the median household income. A lot of similarities there. And we have many people who reside in Stafford County who drive right through, either live in the county or live south of Stafford, and they drive right through the county, make the commute to go to Northern Virginia to take a job there with either fire and rescue or law enforcement as well. And using the Northern Virginia fire response protocols is another reason why we should be compared, something that the Fire and Rescue Department is doing. And then we're losing people, of course. That's who we're competing with, Northern Virginia for the most part. Our competitive jurisdictions are Prince William County and Loudoun County and the feds. And then a secondary is Alexandria and Arlington and Spotsylvania. Right now, we're not losing anyone to Spotsylvania. We have in the past, but currently we're not. But I know Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg, they're both moving towards a public safety pay scale, and they have plans to progress ahead as well. And I'd like to turn it over to Chief Granger.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's my pleasure to stand here with the sheriff and go through the rest of the presentation. We're going to cover where are we trying to get, how do we hope to get there, and what are our next steps. So in our goals, it's important for the the public safety pay scale to address the open range concerns of salary compression and to create and maintain a competitive structure that allows the recruitment and retention of skilled personnel. When either of our public safety agencies hire personnel, we hope that we only get the best of the best, but that we keep the best of the best from moving on through Stafford County. The retention would address the turnover of personnel and continued retraining of both of our organizations, and would align with our competitive jurisdictions since each of our organizations are training based on the standards of the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and national training standards. We hope to achieve full staffing while carrying a 4 or 5% vacancy and 4% annual turnover rate. So how are we trying to get there? The proposal would be to create a structured step system with grades based on the county's recently completed classification and compensation study. There will be minor adjustments to some of the classifications, and we will need to add some intermediate grades to address career development within both of our organizations. The steps are designed to allow maximum pay for a person with an incumbent time between 20 and 29 years, as opposed to the open range max out of 34 or more years with the recent classification compensation study. We're also taking a look at how the advanced life support incentives are paid. Currently, the incentive for our nationally and Commonwealth registered paramedics is added to the base pay, which has artificially increased their salary as opposed to being an incentive, which is the standard for most fire and rescue departments. The next is a comprehensive list of all of the different jurisdictions, those that are primary and secondary competitors, if they have a separate pay scale for public safety, and then if they do, the type of pay scale, whether it's step or open range. And it's important to note that most of our competition has moved to a step and grade system. We'd like to provide for our personnel a predictable progression for pay of the employee so that they can map out their time throughout their tenure within Stafford County, eliminate or remove all compression, make sure that we communicate the need for trained and experienced personnel to stay within Stafford, and then make sure that our personnel aren't looking elsewhere. So what's the timeline? The sheriff and the fire chief addressed the Public Safety Committee on September 17th. We're here with you now, and we'll be with both the Public Safety Committee and the full board at your next meeting on the 15th of this month. And we're open for any questions.
Any questions for Chief Granger or Sheriff Decatur? Anything at all? Thank you all very much. Great
Thank you.
presentation. Thanks for everything you're doing for our community.
Yes, sir.
It
Thank you
really
all.
is appreciated.
Thank you.
With that said, I will adjourn the meeting, and we will reconvene at 5:30 in ABC for a joint meeting with the Economic Development Authority. And after that, we'll return to the chambers at 7 p.m. to finish out the rest of our agenda. All stand. Mr. Cohen will lead us in prayer, and I will lead in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord, we thank you for the many blessings that we have, particularly for family and friends. We thank you for being in a society and a government which allows public input and a free exchange of respectful ways of our ideas. Help us make wise decisions for our county and for all individuals. Please look out for our men and women in the military as they face harm's way and protect us. Be mindful and watchful for our people, our first responders, fire, police, EMT, as they are working day in and day out to make our citizens and our people feel safe and dealing with people rushing through on the roads. We thank you for all the many blessings as we move into fall, and we thank you that as we go into a new season, that maybe the temperatures will fall as well. In your name we thank you. Amen.
At this time, I want to represent representative, want to recognize Mr. Dudenheffer, who will present a proclamation this evening to recognize a National Red Ribbon Campaign and the Young Marine group that represents that campaign. So if you guys would come on up.
Thanks, shake your hand again, right? Got to get in the camera here, you're on television. You know, don't faint or anything, okay? And I'll give you a chance to speak after we get a chance. A lot of people don't know about the Young Marines, and it's kind of a program that I don't think gets the recognition, and I think the values that it teaches, as a Marine myself who spent 30 years in the Corps, I'm impressed that, you know, that these young people would take upon themselves to learn the very, very deep culture of the United States Marine Corps, and honor, courage, and commitment, and the things that we stand for in so many ways. And they get started at a very young age. And I just told them a story of a young Marine nephew of mine who ended up in Iraq and won the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. And I told him, please don't aspire to do that, but certainly I admire the fact that you've taken that to yourself. So we have a proclamation today that I want to read the proclamation and give to these young people, and tell them again how much we appreciate the work that they do. A proclamation to recognize Red Ribbon Week and the Young Marines program in Stafford County. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse in this nation have reached epidemic stages, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate drug abuse, and whereas the Young Marines and a drug demand reduction program sponsored by the Marine Corps League, membership for children ages 8 to 18 or completion of high school, the Young Marine modeled their program after Marine Corps values, honor, courage, and commitment by focusing on teaching youth to live a drug-free lifestyle, teach ideals such as leadership, teamwork, and discipline. And whereas the local branch of the Young Marines is named after Lance Corporal Caleb John Powers, a Marine from Fredericksburg who participated in the program and was killed in action in Iraq. And whereas Lance Corporal Caleb John Powers, Young Marine, participated in and promoted the National Red Ribbon Campaign. Whereas the nation's Red Ribbon Campaign offered citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyle, not use of illegal drugs, nor illegal use of legal drugs. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd to the 31st. And whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical institutions, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during the week-long campaign. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this, the first day of October 2019, that it be and hereby does recognize and commend the Lance Corporal Caleb John Powers Young Marines in their commitment to living and promoting a drug-free life and participation in Red Ribbon Week.
I'd just like to say on behalf of the Young Marines, we thank you for the proclamation, and we thank you for the opportunity to come out here and receive it.
She's shy. Well, thank you very much again for all your work, and if there's ever anything we can do for you, let us know, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dudenhofer. This time it'll be presentations by the public. I do not have any speaker cards. If you wish to address the board, please come forward and state your name and address. If you're a student, please do not give your address. You can speak on any subject except the 2 public hearings that we have scheduled for later tonight. I would ask that you follow the lights. The green light means you start. The yellow light means you have about a minute left. The red light means it's time to wrap it up. So with that said, I think everyone on this side is either the news media or county employees, so I don't think we'll have any speakers over here. Anyone on this side, the left side of the room?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane, gerrymandered Rock Hill District. Respect merits respect. And today, the board addressed the only other citizen that spoke, but you've never addressed Ordinance 82-341, and I don't need you to address it for me. You need to address it for your constituents. One of the things that I forgot to bring up today was that new grocery store, owned by employees from Lakeland, Florida in 1930. And it's now Wegmans. I know it's got an X in its name, so I'll just exit out of my places to go. Now, the other thing that came up today was kind of disturbed me about a citizen requesting that Able Lake in the Chesapeake Bay ordinance area, it's not an ordinance, why would they address a board of supervisors when we all know this is a Dillon's rule commonwealth, it's not a state, as you all keep on saying. So just one of those things you need to keep in mind. It was also very enlightening for me to see that the Commonwealth still has not addressed vape. I mean, the tobacco capital of the world, Virginia, with all its plantations it had. I remember as a consultant, I refused to work for Philip Morris on a consulting assignment just on the merits of respect, merits respect. I've seen what tobacco can do to both my parents as well as young adults, and we need to address this addicting aspect. And it was a very good presentation. I never knew about the Marine program, but I think that's a really good start for everyone. Now, while I was sitting out there yesterday, or today, man, I must have had a senior moment. I love your 2019 bond improving roads. You don't show the divergent diamond because, of course, you're not going to improve it. But you don't show the public exactly what's going on. But you did list all the meandered roads where the Conestoga wagons went. And you're going to widen them, just like the $7.2 million racetrack that's now down Mountain View. And no empty police car is going to stop them from going 70 miles an hour up to Spyglass.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room would like to address the board? Okay, thank you very much. I'll bring it back to the board. Public hearings. Our first public hearing this evening, item number 20, Planning and Zoning. Amend and reordain Stafford County Code to create definitions of uses within the A1 Agricultural Zoning District and amend uses and how such uses are permitted. Ms. Baker, Mr. Harvey.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Kathy Baker, Department of Planning and Zoning. This ordinance amendment is to create and amend certain definitions related to agricultural uses and amend uses in the A1 Agricultural Zoning District. We'll also clarify where these uses are permitted. The board had requested back in 2017 for the Planning Commission to develop an ordinance, and The ordinance would help reduce potential conflicts between agricultural and residential uses, and it would also preserve future and existing agricultural uses in the county. There were 2 Planning Commission committees that helped develop the ordinance. The first one actually included a member of our Agricultural and Purchase of Development Right Committee, and there was also an A1 landowner that was on that first committee. I'm going to go through the changes. The primarily 3 different things that uses were either removed from the A1 district because they aren't really agriculturally related. They were also changed either from by right to either a conditional use permit or a special exception. And in some cases, we had uses that there is now a minimum lot size requirement. Looking at the left column, these are the uses, then the current regulations in the middle, and then the proposed changes in the right-hand column. And I can go through these individually. No?
What's the pleasure of the board? Doesn't seem like it's necessary. Mr. Cohen, would you like to have it?
No, I started on the committee that looked into this, so I'm pretty well versed with
okay.
this.
All right.
That was the majority of my slides was just going through. I can touch on a couple of them that I know that the board specifically had some interest in. Actually, let's go to the end. The event venue, this was a use that really wasn't specified. We've now created that definition and added as a use permitted by special exception, and note that there is a 20-acre lot size and that it would have to be in compliance with any health department regulations. So are there any in particular that you all would want to discuss?
Any questions, Ms. Baker? Could
And
you go
I'll
back
just
one,
note-
just go back one slide there, Kathy. On that event venue,
Mhm.
what do you consider an event? What's the definition of that? Is that a wedding?
Weddings, do you have that handy? Jeff, my able-bodied assistant, i.e. my boss, has that. It's a facility located on a minimum of 20 acres, operated by the owner. They include but are not limited to weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, concerts, reunions, festivals, etc. The facility may contain a kitchen to conduct catering for on-site events only.
And then above that, it says turkey shoot, conditional use. That's a conditional use permit now?
Yes, and that will change to special exception.
Okay, thank you.
On the event venue, would that also include like a company that would want to do meeting space, like not convention, but a meeting space for like 150 people?
Is that included?
Off-site meetings.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Baumke, it would depend on the nature of the business because it's required that the owner of the property be the operator of the venue. So if it's a large corporation, they may or may not be the owner of the property. So for them to do that, they would have to be the owner.
Be the owner?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions before we move off this? One last question from me on that. At the top, go back one slide. Slaughter and animal processing. Today, it's permitted by right. This will require a 10-acre lot size inspected by Virginia Department of Agriculture.
Correct.
So if I'm on my own little farm out here and I'm raising hogs and cattle and I want to slaughter a hog, do I have to have at least 10 acres?
Not just for an individual. If
So it
you're
wouldn't
doing
affect,
that, if
this
you're
is
not-
just to put it together, a commercial venture?
This is primarily a commercial venture.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman? I have a question subsequent to that. If I have a business and I want to process animals for people, so say I want to process my business is processing animals, so I would take in deer, I would take in turkey, I would take in cows, I would take whatever that is and process it. Are you saying in that particular case, because I'm just processing them, that I would have to have minimum 10 acres?
Correct. If you're going to have that facility on the property, it has to be a minimum 10 acres. And the reason for that is just the potential noise and just
We're
general
humane.
nature.
They're not going to scream.
But that's That was the reasoning for requiring the larger lot size.
Okay, I just didn't understand the noise. What would be the noise? I'm sorry, what would be the noise?
Michelle, you're more than welcome to come down to me, with me to the Silver Farm and where they do it. There's a lot of ancillary noises that are there, not just the animal noises.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to note that after the Planning Commission's recommendation, there were 2 changes. Our attorneys felt that there might not have been in compliance with the Virginia Right to Farm Act, and that was regarding the feedlots and slaughter and animal processing. The Planning Commission had recommended those go under, have requirements under the special exception, but the Virginia Right to Farm Act says you can't have special exceptions or conditional use permits for agricultural related uses. Also, aquatourism was added as a by right use by the Planning Commission, but it was, I guess, inadvertent that an associated definition was never created for this. So since there was no specific definition, this was also removed from the version that the Planning Commission approved. So the Planning Commission did recommend approval 7-0, and they also included in their recommendation a request that the board refer a new ordinance down to them regarding minimum acreage requirements for keeping of livestock and poultry. This was a big item of discussion throughout the Planning Commission's deliberations, and looking at particularly 3-acre lot subdivisions that are permitted in the A1, and is it to have livestock and poultry on lots those sizes when you have neighbors that are close. So they would like for the board to consider that and send down that referral to them. With that, I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for Ms. Baker? Thank you, Ms. Baker. This time I'll open the public hearing. Anyone would like to speak for or against this change, please come forward. You have 3 minutes. State your name and address, and you remember the lights.
Paul Waldowski, 8 Picket Lane. I had to change my hat because all the farmers are here. And Waldo's a farmer too, especially on my 3-acre lot that I'll eventually have. And there are advantages of effective agricultural zoning ordinance, such as conserving the current and future energy use by promoting agricultural activities near markets and reducing transportation expense, as well as by limiting suburban sprawl by preserving the farmlands. As I spoke earlier today, you want to present a question to the voter about all these roads. Well, these roads are there because of the farmers were there before any of us were there. The other thing that really bothers me, and that's the acreage aspect. If you go through the county property records in the courthouse, you'll see everything is recorded as acreage, but if you go online, a lot of parcels are still not recorded as acreage, and their tax assessments are opinionated, and they discourage many of the farmers from even keeping their land. You have to remember, in colonial times, tobacco was money. Tobacco was used to go to the cities in the Commonwealth, even if you were a small owner, probably less than 3 acres. So you could get winter supplies, get your horses shoed. So anytime you change agricultural zoning, you should limit suburban sprawl. You need to discourage the costly extension of roads, water, sewer, and other utilities that you bring up in that question to the voters on November 5th, 2019.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room would like to address this issue? Please step forward. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of 019-21, and then if there's a second, I'd like to make a comment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dudenheffer, Mr. Cohen.
Yes, this started way back when I was on the Planning Commission, so about 3 years ago, 3+ years ago. And the Planning Commission and the members of the subcommittee worked very diligently on going through all the different ones, trying to respect the rural landowners and try to make sure that we really did what we should do to protect the rural aspect of the county. This was part of the move that others and myself been pushing for, to try to take all our zoning ordinances and bring them up to the 21st century and make them more relevant with new technology and new situations. So I really am pleased with the work that the subcommittee did and the Planning Commission did, because they looked at what is the best things that we can do in the rural areas to keep it, that the rural landowners can still do what they need to do to keep it rural, but we also are cognizant of some of the growth that has happened out in that area. So I think this was an excellent, long effort. I applaud staff for the many, many, many meetings that you've had over the last several years on this. And so I just think it's an excellent step. And I think this is part of what we need to do with all our zoning ordinances, is bring them up to this century.
Ms. Baumke?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Mr. Cohen said. I know I had an appointee from the PDR committee that really took this very seriously, and his background is farming, represented the Farm Bureau and Virginia Tech Co-op Extension, so he has extensive knowledge, and I just thank everybody that participated in this, because it was a lot of hard work. So, thank you.
Any other comments? I came tonight prepared to vote against this, but I had some questions. Ms. Baker, you answered them. So I will support the motion. No other comments? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Looks like it's going to be an early night. Item number 21, Planning and Zoning, amend and reordain Stafford County Code to require amenities provided in residential developments to meet the same elevation requirement as residential construction. Ms. Baker.
And this will be very brief. This amendment is changing Section 2857 regarding the flood hazard overlay district. The ordinance will allow for parks and playgrounds to be located in floodplains, and these are parks and playgrounds associated with subdivisions. The maintenance of amenities in a residential subdivision, such as basketball courts and tennis courts, are the responsibility of the homeowners associations, and in many instances, the cost to repair surfaces and remove debris from areas that have been hit by flooding can be high. So to prevent the excess flooding, the ordinance would require these amenities in the subdivisions to meet the same elevation requirements that we currently have in the ordinance, which is 3 feet above the base flood elevation. This is just an example that was submitted showing a tennis court that was underwater, and this was near Aquia Creek, if I recall. And then some of the after effects of that the HOA ended up having to pay someone to come and get that court back in shape. So staff is recommending adoption of the ordinance. Elevating these amenities will help protect them from flooding, and I'll note that the Planning Commission recommended approval of this 7-0 as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms.
Mr.
Baker?
Chairman, I have a
Yes, Ms. Schell.
Ms. Baker, what is the definition of a recreational amenity? I couldn't find it.
Give me just one moment.
And very specifically, what I was looking for and why I couldn't find it outside of the code is because I wanted to know what, if I had a trail, if I had a walking trail, if I had a fishing pond, if I had some other relatively natural amenity, how does that fit into this code?
And I know the Planning Commission had that same concern, and that's why they were specific in the ordinance that they talk about the courts and other sporting facilities. Give me just a second while I pull that up. unless Jeff already beat me to it. So just, again, to reiterate, the amenities constructed such as tennis courts, basketball courts, and similar court facilities, sports fields, tot lots, and playgrounds shall meet the same elevation. And
Okay, Mr. Chairman, just a little bit of latitude. So if I showed up and I was doing a development and I had and I had trails and I had a pond, that you guys would be okay with that?
we would not include that as,
Okay,
as
good.
this type of amenity.
Okay, I just didn't want any misinterpretation there. Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Baker? Thank you, Ms. Baker. This time I'll open the public hearing. Once again, you have 3 minutes to speak on this issue, for or against. Once you come to the podium, please give your name and address, and the time will start. The green light is a go, the yellow light means you have a minute left, and the red light means wrap up your comments. Anyone in the room would like to speak for or against this amendment change?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Picket Lane. Golly. Okay, let's start with the elevating of a parcel. Still doesn't get it out of a floodplain. Even if you elevate the tennis court, it's still on a floodplain. And flash flooding has proven that if there are campers in parks or other entities, it could lead to serious injury or even death. You all know my view of HOAs, the houses of aristocrats, which are Virginia corporations, which we are now proving in the 21st century that they belong in Florida, where they were, not in Virginia. That was, let's see, Stafford County was established in 1664. So there were no HOAs at that time. And now they want all this help to take care of stormwater management, if you will, in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Well, good luck. I know earlier today you wanted someone to pray for rain. I keep telling you, look at Colossians 2:8, beware of the philosophies of men and not of things according to Christ. And last year when we had all the rain, you can see what's happened, especially on Shelton Shop Road, where the elevations of the new subdivision are way below what they started. Now, if we really took care of the parcels and we put in each parcel what the real acreage is there an easement there? Is it elevated? Wow, we might even get an accurate tax assessment. Who knows? I may be one of 6 who might win an award for a video. But then again, I don't compare property to hot dogs, which is tube steak, or steak, which is chicken fried steak, or fishy caviar, which is on Channel 18.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the chamber like to address the board? Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? I close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
I have a motion for
Second.
approval, second by Ms. Bomke. Any discussion? Hearing none, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Just want to thank the staff very much. It's been a long day. You did a great job, and go Nationals. Meeting adjourned.